of Bloomberg Business Week, and hopefully Doug will walk in the middle of our panel. Is this? No, I don't recognize him. So, but we have a terrific panel today. I'm just going to actually read you the title to show you just how ambitious we're planning. The Economics of Media and Entertainment, 21st Century Strategy for Content, Advertising, Technology, Monetization. Oh, hi, Doug. Is this Doug?
Yes, it is Doug.
Okay, here you are. Wait. Howard is blocking your view, so there, you're right there.
I'm sorry.
We'll give a big round of applause. I should have come to get you. So, strategy for content, advertising, technology, monetization, and global reach. In other words, if we address all these topics, it could be the most valuable hour of your entire careers, if not your entire lives. So, here are the men charged with tackling all that. On the far end, we have John Partilla, Executive Vice President and President of Global Media Sales for Clear Channel Media Holdings. Tuna Amobi, Director, Consumer Discretionary Media and Entertainment for Standard & Poor's Equity Research, former colleague. Right. And Kevin Conroy, President of Univision Interactive Media. Howard Owens, Managing Director at Reveille. I always feel accomplished when I pronounce that correctly. Doug Chekaris, CEO of Mediacom North America, and Bruce Campbell, Director of Digital Media and Corporate Development at Discovery Communications. Welcome, everyone. Well, since we are so ambitious, I'm going to start big. Wither the U.S. economy. No, I won't do that. But tell me about the changes you've seen in your businesses over the past year. Any surprises? If you want to take a few minutes to weep, you can do that quietly. But just tell us a little bit about what you find most exciting. I'll start with you at the far end.
Sure.
Thanks,
I think we're all living through, obviously, one of the most difficult years any of us have had. Unless, many of us were working in 1972, 73, which was also similar, cyclical decline. Here's the good and the bad of it. The good news is we are experiencing a return. We're seeing spending begin to recover slightly. The bad news is not all sectors will recover equally in the media business, and I think we all have to acknowledge that reality. And of course, within the sectors, not all companies are responding equally. So in a nutshell, we're seeing responsiveness to this economy, but the change, I think, has knocked the wind out of some sectors temporarily, but other sectors on a more permanent basis, and that's one new reality we're all confronting.
Tuna, maybe talk a little bit about, we've seen a lot of carnage in the media over the past year,
Sure.
what the fallout is.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? I covered the large cap media and entertainment companies, as Diane alluded to, for Standard & Poor's, so most of the conglomerates as well as some of the mid-cap companies, both on the content and distribution side. So more specifically to your question, I think everyone can agree that the mood this year's conference is vastly different from last year. I think all of the data points that we've seen in recent months continue to point to continued macroeconomic improvement. Whether it's on the GDP, data points or consumer confidence or the stabilization in the housing sector. So I think, the way we see it is that we're still looking at a U-shaped recovery as opposed to kind of a V-shaped or W-shaped recovery. I think that kind of ties into what John was saying. We think that this is a very good time for companies to take advantage of the still relatively low valuations to look for some assets that could be complementary to their core businesses. So in sum, I think the takeaway is that media companies that we talk to, as well as investors, the mood is more optimistic. I think media companies have never been at the intersection of cross currents that affecting content, technology, and services as they are today. I think that's the challenge, is to be able to develop new models to take advantage of an ever-changing world that we're living in as a result of time shifting and place shifting. So I think there's a lot to be said about the opportunities as we look ahead for this year.
Okay. Kevin?
I would just add, to build on those thoughts, I think we should remind ourselves that more people are consuming more media than at any point in history. And that at the end of the day, the media business is about reach and engagement, that we're able to offer more reach and more engagement than ever before. And so really the opportunity and the challenge is how you go about packaging that media in different ways that allow marketers and other commercial enterprises to be able to monetize that engagement and accept that it's going to be in different forms and monetize it differently. But the good news is that there's more reach and more engagement to begin with. And as it relates to the market that we're focusing on, you know, a really important thing about the Hispanic market is that unlike English language media, where it's largely around moving share, in the Hispanic market, it's natural growth. So the population is growing naturally, media consumption is growing naturally, and from a spending power perspective, if you were to rank U.S. Hispanic spending power independently, it would rank as the 15th largest economy in the world. So from our perspective, we're quite optimistic, recognizing that really the market is really just beginning to stabilize. But we are very optimistic about where this is all headed, leaning into what we believe to be some natural growth and looking beyond advertising-supported models, which I think continue to be terribly important, but at other types of consumption models.
Howard.
We all know 2009 was a brutal year. The good side to 2009 for us was that our company, and in media in general, it feels like the media assets and franchises that were perennial, that were older, you know, those shows became more valuable. So in a year of retrenchment, the networks and the studios didn't invest in new media, so therefore shows like The Biggest Loser, shows like American Idol, those shows had the best years ever. The Super Bowl was at a peak this year. Last year, you know, was one of the other great years. So people did crave content. Media companies invested less because of the recession in 2009. So at least for our company, it allowed The Office and The Biggest Loser to reach new highs, and it allowed us to continue, you know, allowed us to make investments. My partner and the owner of our company, Liz Murdoch, made some strategic acquisitions over 2009 that sort of put us in a pretty good position right now, buying great content just makers in Australia, Germany, and France. Last year, when the networks weren't buying, we were shoring up our digital content productions. We're one of the biggest suppliers for Microsoft and branded entertainment. We've created a new relationship with Yahoo and are doing branded entertainment for them and digital content. So that was where we had to be sleek. We had to think the networks weren't buying. But as 2010 is upon us, it feels like the floodgates are open. The NBC-Comcast merger is great things for, you know, could be a great thing for suppliers. When I get out of my taxi this morning and see Parenthood, the billboard, you haven't seen NBC, you know, buy a Times Square billboard for a new show in several years. So that's kind of off-network programming. They're investing in old media again due to their relationship and the cash infusion from Comcast, who wants to bet big on content. That's
Okay, great.
I think I'd like to take a look at this maybe three different ways. First, I'd say, you know, looking at the post-recession consumer is kind of an important thought. And I'd say that, you know, any
Are we
thought
post-recession? I just read the Greek crisis is over, so good news all around. Yeah.
Well, I think you have to look at it this way. And I think when we talk to consumers, it's quite fascinating is, you know, there was a period when people stopped because there was a lot of unknown. I think now we have a profound structural change underway. High single-digit, low double-digit inflation is with us for the foreseeable future. But that says 90% of the people are working. But the people who are working and who are earning will have a completely different view of the world. And they will have a completely different view of their relationships with all the people in it, the media they consume, the companies they deal with, and how they see those things. Because they will look at it through a much different filter than the pre-recession boom. They won't be bullish. They'll think about saving before they'll think about spending. So this idea that there's a rebound coming back suggests that the world's going to return to something that it was like before. And I would say that's just complete folly. It's just not going to be that way. In terms of how our clients behaved, which was really interesting, two things. One is the work we do in terms of thinking through how to use those marketing dollars most efficiently has never been more important. What we do has never been more important than how you select, how you optimize. But at the same time, they turned loose the procurement hounds upon us and everyone like us. And so at the same time, when the work we do has probably never been more valuable, we'll struggle very hard to get paid to do that work. I mean, it's just a reality of what we're in today. This too will pass, but it has been an absolutely vicious year in that regard. So I would say in terms of companies in the media planning, buying, optimization business, clearly our focus is shifting much more strongly away from flinging impressions at consumers and hoping that they stick to really driving results. And more importantly, what does good counsel look like in a day and age that's completely different, and trying to understand how the consumers will move towards brand new relationships with everything in their lives.
I guess to give you the perspective of the cable pure play, which is really what we are, you know, for everyone, 2009 was a tough year, and in some respects we were no different, particularly on the advertising side as it related to some of the key categories that play well to our male audience, like auto and financials. That said, you know, we were able to weather the storm pretty well for a number of reasons. First, as a cable pure play, 50% of our revenue in the U.S. was locked in through sub fees. Outside of the U.S., where we generate about a third of our revenue, over $1 billion, nearly 70% of that is locked in through sub fees. At the same, so that was a sort of stable source for us last year. At the same time, you know, our networks in the U.S., networks like TLC and Animal Planet, benefited from some of the strongest rating growth in their history. So that really offset some of the demand issues we had on the advertising side. I think as we look into 2010, as it's been alluded to several times here on the panel, the good news is the market is coming back. I think the one thing that's different from past years is just the visibility. And we're still living in more of a near-term environment when we look at the advertising demand, but again, we have reason to be optimistic. I think the other big issue for us, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on the panel, and it's an issue for all cable networks, is broadcast retrans and how that's shaken up the media landscape here in literally less than a year, and the implications that will have not only for what the cable operators are willing to pay for programming and pay for networks, particularly from the cable network side, but also what it means for programming. You know, now you're going to have the big broadcast networks with this infusion of cash. Where is that going? Clearly, a lot of it's going to go into sports rights. What does that mean for the sports landscape? But also, what does it mean for us as competitors for that programming? So I think in terms of what's changed, that's a big change for all of us.
Before we drill deep on pillorying the competition and such, I want to talk a little bit about making money in digital and what you've been doing in that area since everybody still struggles. I don't know, maybe Kevin, talk a little bit about the mobile platforms. Howard, Biggest Loser, not you, the show.
Thank you.
But you know how you've been making money in those areas. Go ahead.
Sure.
So I would say I think that there are three issues that need to be addressed before we see the kinds of monetization on interactive platforms around, for example, ad-supported models that other platforms, broadcast, cable, et cetera, today enjoy. Issue number one centers around measurement. As I'm sure you know, lots of people know, there have been a lot of issues around, for example, what's happening with measurement in the radio industry. There hasn't been as much attention given to the measurement issues around the interactive platforms, but I think those measurement issues are really quite real. And I think that we need to make some progress before the planning and buying cycle is as smooth and confident around interactive as it is on some other platforms. That's issue number one. Issue number two, I think, is around the actual advertising units themselves. While there are some emerging standards, and there's a lot of good work in that area led by the IAB and the like, the reality is that it's still a little, frankly, more complicated to execute an interactive campaign than it is on other platforms. There are standards, but there's still lots of different ad units. And an example is, for example, video. where there is a lot of supply. In other kinds of areas like banner impressions and the like, you have far more supply than there is demand, which is why you see pricing where it is, which is why you see so many people trying to focus on creating premium impressions. In video, it's an area where there actually is considerable demand. The CPMs are much higher, but there are not very many ad units to choose from. And so that, I think, is the second obstacle. And then the third, I think, is creative. I think there is an issue around creative. I would rank it third. I don't think it's the lead issue. But I would challenge all of us to really think back over a 3, 5, 7, 10-year period and think about the most memorable campaigns that really resonate with you. And I would venture to guess that very few of them are online campaigns. And so I don't think we've really had a breakthrough yet, if you will, that really gets the interactive platform to where some other platforms are by way of sort of breakthrough creative. And so because of all of that, and there's a lot of good work being done to address all three of those, but because of all of that, I think you have a situation where it's frankly been hard to monetize via an advertising supported only model in the same way that you can other platforms. And I think that we've gone through a bit of a natural cycle, I would argue a natural cycle, where consumers, users really wanted to explore widely. They wanted things to be free because they wanted to, see what was out there. And I think we're now, about to turn the corner to a place where people, now that they've had a chance to explore pretty widely and freely, are going to figure out what's worth paying for. And the combination of users making some choices about what they're willing to pay for, together with content owners having the ability to actually experiment with new payment models, and technology providers actually becoming the platform. So I do think that we're going to see over the course of the next 12, 18, and 24 months a really interesting and frankly very attractive cycle where you begin to see, in addition to advertising supported models, not in place of, the beginnings of some real at-scale payment models. And at the end of the day, we're going to end up with, I think, essentially three models, which is, let's call it free over-the-air ad-supported, payment in an a la carte on-demand form, and ultimately the resurgence of various subscription offerings, which is interestingly a lot like the way television looks like today, except the weighting will be very different, in my view, around those different models.
Does everybody agree?
Yeah, I
John,
just want
you're
to...
nodding.
Well, I just want to build on what Kevin said because I want to go back to the point you also made earlier, which is, our businesses are as complex as we make it. And I think Kevin started off with a very good focus point, which is its media ultimately is about audiences that we connect to, consumers, and we offer advertisers a way to connect into those audiences. And so we're really about the reach or breadth of that sort of funnel that we attract into the call it tent with advertisers and with consumers, and the ability to then drive home the engagement or keep that audience engaged as long as you can inside your funnel or inside your tent. And I think one thing we're figuring out with radio is there's been a resurgence back to and a recognition that we have a very large, top of the funnel. We have 59 million daily listeners across the nation of Clear Channel radio stations. And I just was comparing the statistics to someone else on the cover of Fast Company magazine about a month ago. Ashton Kutcher was on it, and they called him the new media mogul because he had 3.9 million daily Twitter followers. But it wasn't what the magazine thought or even what Ashton thought. What was also on the cover were a lot of advertisers saying Kellogg's thinks so and PepsiCo thinks so, and they think so, and that's a big perception. We have 59 million daily listeners, across the radio network of Clear Channel. But our challenge is, how do we keep those people in our tent longer? How do we engage them? And that's where we get into this digital content discussion. And so we may be talking about monetization. I think about it as you really can't do one without the other anymore. You need to take the scale of media that we have. I don't think there's any more, I don't think we can anymore say old media, new media. I think we can say there's scale media, there's emerging media, and I think we both have a responsibility, whether you're scale or emerging, to lean into new digital technologies and aspects. Mm-hmm. So the challenge for Clear Channel and the challenge for every other media company is how do you take whatever your breadth of audience is and how do you keep them engaged as long as possible inside your funnel or inside your tent? And how do you figure out a good, easy way to monetize that for the advertising base? And frankly, there isn't any one way, as Kevin said, but No longer do advertisers just want to come in for eyeballs. They want to come in for eyeballs and engagement. And so we're just figuring out the payment paths.
Right. And to what both of you guys, to agree with both of you and to bring up Kevin's latest concept, both of you are keying into, creating concepts that can be financed based on new distribution models, people not paying for content. But I think what's crucial to the radio and what's crucial to what you said, Kevin, about your last note on creative, which is there are only so many Ryan Seacrest. There are only so much good content.
Should we say thank God? No. Okay, sorry.
Well, whether you're a fan or not, the guy,
I am a fan.
has a daily radio show. He's on E! Every day. He's a real media mogul. He's on American Idol, the world's most popular show. And, just like, OWN is now, Oprah's going off the air. And, OWN is like, we want to, they want to create a bunch of shows and they want it to be, I'm like, it's not easy to create a show without Oprah. It's a lot, it's to say, oh, we want to start a new Oprah. I mean, these are one-of-a-kind people. The real problem that we have, that we face, is creating content when there's no money to create it, and that when you create it, the big 5 or 6 media companies want to control all the rights. There's becoming a dearth of creative ingenuity in the country because of the rights, because of the, in addition to the NBC-Comcast merger, Discovery, big standalone independent player, but a player that gobbles up a lot of rights and wants rights if you're going to play ball with them. We don't have the UK model where independents get to hold on to a specific part of their content. Sinn Féin has destroyed, the big, an appetite for big companies to give up any content. There's an oligopoly out there for the media producers and for the media distributors, and it really puts pressure on coming up with new content in any kind of entrepreneurial way. I think that pressure will hopefully, and that entrepreneurial zeal, if it is allowed to be unleashed, will also vitalize the hardware necessary and the new ad models necessary to be able to monetize that new content at some point. I still just look at growth and opportunity when I'm in Asia and able to open my Kindle and get today's New York Times versus to be able to maybe get the International Herald Tribune, or maybe able to get an 8-page, 8 pieces of paper that are stapled together, as 4 days ago Times. Like, I can get media anywhere, wherever I am, in a taxi, in any country. I can get my media. I can get rival sports. Yahoo Sports had had more Olympics watchers than ESPN and NBC combined. They're doing something right from an editorial perspective. How they monetize that is to be determined. And really what we're here to talk about.
Can I just add quickly to that?
And then we'll get to Bruce gobbling up everybody.
So just going back to the reach and engagement piece, because I do think at the end of the day, it's really pretty good news to get organized around, is in a world where media really is either going back to or becoming more about engagement, which is what the interactive platforms really lend themselves to, I think there's a really pretty interesting economic opportunity to have a choice as a content creator producer to say, well, wait a minute, advertisers are more than ever looking to really own properties through product integration, et cetera, kind of going back to the Texaco Presents, Hallmark Presents kind of model. And in a payment world where you have a certain number of people who sign up for to buy a boxing match or to become a subscriber to something, you actually have a choice in a set of mediums about interactive that's about engagement to be able to say, well, wait a minute, I actually have 3 ways to monetize this. I could have this be wrapped in a sponsorship and product integration with a deep partnership with an advertiser or 2 or 3. Or I could put this out to a market of targeted consumers who want to essentially do a, pay for the boxing match model. Or I can actually build a subscriber base over a period of time of consumers who are particularly interested in a particular genre of programming. And they, in essence, those models become a new form of deficit financing, I think.
Go ahead, Tuna.
Yeah, what I'm seeing from the companies that I've been following is kind of an evolutionary process where I think most of the companies now are realizing that, the pay-for-download model is not going to, and while they're making money from, the pay-for-download model, I think there's a realization that it's not going to be able to, support the digital business model over a longer period of time, as well as, and that's also true for the ad-supported model. So I think you're seeing over the last few years more companies kind of experimenting in terms of how perhaps new models like, access-based streaming models can supplement some of these, kind of older, if you want to call it older models. I think that ties into what Kevin was saying. So I think, digital revenues, as much as it's still a relatively small stream, my sense is that there definitely needs a lot more, creativity, a lot more, that needs to happen for the stars to be aligned and get it to where you can begin to see digital revenues becoming more meaningful. And the pay-for-download model can't do it all. Maybe we'll get to that later in the panel, but I do believe that measurement, which you alluded to, is definitely a big obstacle. Some of these companies are doing things around that, whether it's the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement, which some of the large media companies are trying to address for things like online video. Nielsen also has this A2, M2. But overall, I think that, there needs to be, a lot of things that have to come together before you can now have this, what I call confluence of digital strategies for these companies to kind of build on what they have.
I want to stop and ask a little bit about engagement, because social media keeps coming up with Twitter and Facebook. How many people have Twitter accounts in the audience? On the panel? I notice when I talk to people, they always talk about how many followers they have, but they never actually follow anybody. Especially the bigger they are, they're likely to have 13,000 followers and be following 3 people. So I'm thinking, where's the interactive nature of this? Yeah. And is it not just another soapbox, for a lot of these brands? I'm curious to hear from you, Doug, about how you're viewing the digital space.
I think it's about freedom. I think we can talk about Facebook and Twitter. I think they're all...
Ashton Kutcher.
We can actually, let's assume they're all somewhat transient.
All of them?
I think they all are, to a degree, somewhat transient. Because, really,
remember
what commitment
Friendster?
do you...
Wait.
No, but another Friendster. But if you think about it, just take the most basic view. You're on my 17-year-old is on Facebook, as is my 19-year-old.
Are you his friend?
And I'm his friend. Now, how long can that last? Because
as long as you keep paying the bills, right?
But your son or the friend?
Both. But I think the reality of that is that it takes very little. There is something new coming along, and it will fragment more. And I think this idea of post-recession consumers and their idea of networks, they'll become much more specialized to people. I don't think they'll be as broad as they are today. They'll continue to fragment, and people will go. It's kind of like the nightclub. My son doesn't want to see, or my daughter doesn't want to see my wife in the nightclub at the same time with them. It just doesn't want to happen. They want their own unique experience as youth. So I think there's, massive interest in social, and it's fantastic. There is incredible things that can be done. And I think there's very scalable things. And I look at something we did with Marriott just a little while ago. Basically, we created some content about users. It cost maybe $300,000. We put it out in the marketplace. We bought a little bit. We earned a little bit. We turned up $2 million in room sales for $300,000. Simple little social campaign. So the question is it scalable to, change the business results of it? Not yet, but it is how you're going to learn these things. And I think I'd just like to go back to the previous part of this conversation about how do you monetize digital? Well, I think we all have to accept the fact that in the old world, it was all rigged against the advertising. They put up the money to plan, to create the advertising, to pay in advance for a big, long campaign. Now, the digital world and the way we work in the digital world and advertising agency is really almost all of the work is after the fact. So talking about, measurement's important and it's interesting, but the reality is it's ongoing. You can test, you can look at things you're going to change, you're going to optimize. And so I think that's more the interesting part, is you have to step in and you have to learn. And the beautiful part of it is, as the world becomes more digital, there will be more and more information, more pieces of feedback. The difficulty will be for everyone to deal with the masses of data and turn it into an insight that you can do something with quickly. I think we touched on the idea of creative, and I think it's a huge issue facing advertisers right now, which is, as they need more and more and more, the cost of producing, managing.
You're talking about localized, customized, it's just too much strain.
Well, just think about it. In the day when you had to have a television commercial and a couple of print ads, it was pretty simple. Very expensive to get created by an advertising agency, but it was possible. But now they have all this. And I think what we'll see in that is a great deal more revenue sharing programs. We'll see partnerships that will look completely different, that where there's, I think, a shared risk between who wants to sell the media, who wants to create it, and the people who organize it. I just think it's going to be completely different in that way.
In terms of monetizing content, we have simple ways in which right now we have a campaign with Walmart and Yahoo for Shine. It's at least 50 episodes reaching the Walmart mom. Pretty lucrative. I think it's pretty good for Walmart. They're getting their hands dirty. We're learning more about the advertiser. And then we have also the pay model with Biggest Loser and Rodale and NBC. That's a joint venture.
Yeah, talk about the Biggest Loser and the success you've had there.
Well, that was something that when we pitched and came up with the idea for BiggestLoser.com, that people would pay $19.99 a month for bespoke workouts, menus, for the type of person they are, the kind of calories they want to burn, how heavy you are, how old you are. People laughed at us and said maybe we'd get, 500 people sign up. We've had, on a slow month, it's 50,000 users. Right now, it's about 75,000. It's well over an 8-figure business. It's a 3-way joint venture with Rodale, Reveille, and LLC. And Reveille and Rodale conceptualized it. We're working on other things. We're working to attack verticals. We have MasterChef coming out this summer on Fox. I think the online food vertical promises potential, perhaps a la carte. Perhaps there is a food club to get, recipes and the best homemade recipes in the world. But I do think, and I go back to your comment about the world being, rigged against the advertiser, coming from someone who, is always looking for an alternative financing model. I find the advertiser accepting the rigged, and it's sort of annoying. It's been really frustrating. If you're a Unilever or a Microsoft and you spend $6 billion a year in marketing and in media and advertising, you are a media company whether you like it or not. And for you not to at least own anything or not to, acknowledge that your partnership in advertising is essential to the success of your company is really an aloofness that's unacceptable. And what's happened with the breakdown in distribution is that it's allowed companies like ours and creatives like ours to seek partnerships with advertisers who are looking for creative solutions. And I think it's opened up some of their eyes and made them not rely on the 30-second spot and have to be more aggressive. And it's good for all of us here.
I want Bruce to step in. You have Hasbro, Sony, Oprah. Talk about your acquisitive nature and how that's worked out for you. You've got a lot of interesting partnerships going on.
Yeah. One of the great things we have at Discovery is terrific real estate. So we have 13 networks in the U.S. and well over 100 outside the U.S. But there was a recognition by the management team, including our CEO who came in about 3 years ago, that maybe we couldn't program every one of those by ourselves. And maybe there were strategic reasons why we should bring in partners that often go beyond content consideration. So we kind of did a survey across all the networks that were in the sort of 60 million household and below level and figured out which ones were organic repositioning opportunities and which ones might make sense as partnership opportunities. Some of the organic repositionings have been terrific successes. The most notable is Investigation Discovery, which used to be a network called Discovery Times, which is kind of a documentary network. And under the leadership of Henry Schleif, who came over from Court TV, we've repositioned that as a crime and forensics network, which has had terrific ratings growth, almost 200% ratings growth since the relaunch. However, again, with the breadth of networks, we recognize that in some cases, we might need a little push. And clearly Oprah is the most notable of those. We looked at the Discovery Health Network, which has fantastic reach. It's in over 70 million homes. But health as a standalone category is a bit of a challenging proposition in a linear environment. You know, most people, when they have questions about health, want to go online and get their answers immediately. And I think it's sort of reflective of the power of the internet and the ability to deliver real-time information. So that network migrated a bit away from being a true health network to more of a lifestyle network. So when we thought about the lifestyle category and the women's lifestyle category, who better to partner with than the most recognizable brand in media? So we went to her a couple of years ago and really, you know, made the pitch to her not only about the creative opportunity that an entire network would provide to her, but also about the changing media landscape and the value of cable economics relative to broadcast syndication as we move forward. So we couldn't be happier with where that's going. We're going to launch early next year, and we have high hopes for it. I think Hasbro, that JV is a bit different. We looked at another one of our networks, Discovery Kids, which again has about probably around 62 million households and has had some real good critical success. Very high quality programming, well recognized by parents and organizations. The challenge though, and this will come as no surprise to anyone in this room, the kids cable environment is incredibly competitive. You have, you know, a couple 800-pound gorillas and Disney and MTV and Cartoon Network, so I guess 3. And while Discovery has this great brand as being a family-friendly brand, we really only had one network that was exclusively kids. So we wanted to find a way not only to broaden the content that we could bring to that network, but also to find a way to get into some of the other businesses that Disney and Viacom do so well. So we were fortunate to make the connection with Hasbro just as Brian Goldner, their CEO, was sort of embarking on rethinking that company, really looking at the terrific 100 years worth of intellectual property and trying to, you know, take that beyond just toy manufacturing. Movies, they've had great success with Transformers and some of their other IP. They've got a deal in the video gaming space. TV was the next step for them. So we really hit it at the right time. You know, we have gone out of our way to make it clear this is not going to be an infomercial network for Hasbro toys. This is really about quality children's entertainment. I'm not at liberty to share what the programming idea is right now, but suffice to say, people
Transformers will be in there.
Transformers will clearly be in there. But some very good stuff, and we've got great leadership in Margaret Loesch, who's running that network. Then lastly, we just announced a couple months ago a 3-way partnership with IMAX and Sony to launch a 3D network. And again, I think it's an example of where JVs make sense. I mean, it's no surprise to anyone who's been involved in a JV, they are tough things to execute. On the other hand, when you find a relationship where each of the partners brings something to unique, that gets you closer to the recipes for success. We looked at 3D much as, you know, the Discovery team looked at high definition television 12 years ago as something we need to have a leadership position in. People expect the Discovery brand to be associated with the most powerful visual impact possible. But it's greenfield. You know, this is we don't really know what the adoption of 3D sets is going to be. We don't know how quickly the production community is going to jump into 3D. So a partnership as a way of, you know, somewhat modifying the risk made sense, but also bringing in partners who could add to what we have. And Sony has terrific content, both on the film side and on the video game side, on the music side. And IMAX has a brand that's synonymous with that powerful visual experience, as well as technology. So we feel great about it. It's still early, but the partnership is working well. So again, partnerships are hard. They take a lot of work, but I think where you find the right recipe, there can be success.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
If I could just build on that for a second. So we really fully believe in that model. And I think I would just add that, because our strategy is very partner-centric, I would also add that every new platform is an opportunity, I think, for at least a couple of things to happen. You know, existing brands can transfer their equity, their value proposition to that new platform, and there are lots of notable examples of, you know, really strong cable brands that have then now become more 360-degree brands, et cetera. But there are also notable examples where brands have not made the leap, not transferred the equity, not created a value proposition, and left open an opportunity for somebody else to create new value on that platform. And so part of the benefit of a partner-centric strategy, putting aside the deal structure, whether it's joint venture or otherwise, there is a real opportunity to leverage existing value, existing brand equity to get to market sooner, faster, with something that's stronger, that allows you to extend value across these different platforms. And media companies are somewhat uniquely positioned to be able to do it if they do create value, because if a media company has, broadcast franchise, cable franchise, online, mobile, video on demand, ITV, et cetera, then you've got that many more touch points to touch the consumer to create value in the way consumers are living their lifestyle today, which is really quite different.
Okay.
If I could just add, I think this is a really important point, is that in my experience, and frequently happens, and that's exactly the right answer, is that the media sellers have an excellent palette to work with. To engage that palette in a productive, optimal way is as hard as hell from an agency point of view. And sometimes that's because we have struggles getting the client wrangled, but also it's because it ends up being an a la carte menu. You got this, and this is an extra charge, this an additional charge, and in the end, sometimes these ideas collapse on their own poor economics, in that it really doesn't make sense to have pay this for the rights to be in the program, plus this, plus this, plus this. I think there's a responsibility on both sides to say, if we're in it, what's the outcome, what's the value of the outcome, and how do we make that work? And I think that's exactly right. And I think it is part of what the market's learning how to do better, because the number of times I've sat with clients who say, here's how I want to engage my customer, and here's what it looks like. And the answer is, have we mentioned we've got 30s in the Super Bowl? Because and I think there's an internal struggle over it's essentially economic argument. There's all kinds of internal silos and who gets paid for what. You got to kind of follow the money on that. But I think it's true, and it is incredibly hard work to do it well. When you do it well, it's genius. And I think what I've learned on that is, in the first 5 minutes of the first meeting, whether everybody buys into the idea. We did something recently between H&M and Elle, and it was a really interesting insight into the consumer. We were talking to consumers, and we found out that they got the proposition, they understood it completely. But if you've ever been in an H&M, it's inexpensive fashion, it's delivered, and it's only there for a short time. So what sells, when it's gone, it's gone. So it creates this energy in the store. The problem is it's quite chaotic in the store. So we didn't come up with a media solution. We came up with an idea that said Elle would create outfits, and there would be an Elle branded section in the store. And a brilliant partnership that drove a massive increase in sales. To me, that's a piece of genius.
And from my side, we created a show that the winner of the show, and it was about young entrepreneurs. It was very different. It was trying to be the anti-Project Runway, which is so good and already out there and controls the space. This show is not about couture. It is about the modern entrepreneur who's either a cobbler in Brooklyn, a handbag maker in Austin, someone who makes something and needs to market it to the masses. We thought, what better than to have Target as the winner? Target could be a partner. The winner gets a launch at Target. Also, we'd be working with fashion institutes, hopefully